Hello, everyone. I don't know why I waved. This is going to be audio only. But this is the first discussion for the Prince of Nothing trilogy. We are reading an individual part in the book at a time, which, the book is divided into parts. There are five in the first book, which is The Darkness That Comes Before. Today's discussion is going to cover the first part and the prologue, the first 130 pages in the trade paperback edition, if that's what you are reading from. Um, this recording will go up on my channel, Reading by the Rainy Mountain, possibly my podcast, I decide, and Steve's PageChewing podcast. Steve's here with us. He can start us off with introductions.
Oh, you're picking on me, huh?
Yeah.
So I'm really happy to be here. This is actually my third time reading The Darkness That Comes Before. But I had just finished the series, I don't know, a few months ago.
Mhm.
It's great to be back in the world, and I'm picking up a lot of stuff that I'd missed the first time. So I'm really happy to be here.
And you also get to tag the next person who introduces themselves.
Okay. Mike, will you go next?
Yeah, my name's Mike. Member of the PageChewing forum. Just happy to be discussing with you. I like kind of some of the darker stuff. I'm really stoked to read this book, and it's been a great first part. Part one has been awesome. So I don't have any special. I'm not a content creator, I should say, but again, just really happy to be talking with you.
You are now, Mike.
Yeah.
I guess so. Wow.
There you go. And I'm Carl. I am a self-published fantasy author of Truth of Crowns. My first book just came out a few months ago, and a member of the PageChewing forum. Very happy to be part of this community and to be talking about this book series, which is my first read through, but I'm very much enjoying it. It's definitely got me hooked.
Yeah, there was something about it, wasn't there? I was expecting to, I don't know, beginnings of the book don't usually grab me that much. It's usually by the middle that I get really invested. But I was hooked for this one.
Are we talking spoilers from right off the bat, or are we doing a non-spoiler and then spoilers? What's the strategy here?
I think we can do spoilers unless, let's just do, we can talk about anything. Because I guess the idea is potentially people are reading along with us. So 130 pages is what we're discussing. So
Awesome.
Spoilers all the way through.
Very cool. Yeah, I definitely found I did not expect to get hooked this quickly. One, because I'd been told that this was a slower series and that book one in particular was a lot of setup. And beyond that, it's not uncommon in epic fantasies, I feel like in particular, that it takes, 200 pages, sometimes even more to really get going. But I had a reaction to this like I did to reading Game of Thrones for the first time, where a certain young character falls and I'm hooked. And in this case, admittedly, slightly older than Bran Stark, but I just especially that last chapter, I was like, oh my God, I cannot believe what we're in for. I love the horror elements, it's so creepy. Everything, the bad guys, the consult, I just love how terrifying they are. And I think the prologue really lends itself, to that early on.
Right. Yeah. I what did you think, Mike?
Oh yeah, no, I have to say, I thought the prologue was, it's like the prologue is in two parts, because you have the 2000 years before bit, if I'm not mistaken. So that brings up a lot of okay, this is interesting, but what's going on? And then brings us into Kellis, who for me, I was just like, this is an interesting character that I haven't really come across before yet. And he's got these abilities to kind of, what is it? he knows like everybody's movements. He knows kind of what is going to happen before it happens, and he goes up against, I guess, is it a non-man, non-man,
Mm-hmm.
which was also, I mean, the guy is pretty badass.
Is it cloak of like, what was that? Was it human face, or was it the
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Like,
That was when he was describing it, I was like, this is the most metal shit I've ever read. Like, I could not believe it. I loved it. I was like, okay, I'm here for it. That was definitely the moment in the prologue where they had me. I thought like everything before that was like interesting, kind of slow moving. Kellis was definitely very intriguing. You know, he's almost like Sherlock Holmesian power of like deduction, like
Yeah.
able to read people and interpret, you know, human psychology so well that he can manipulate people and predict their actions and that sort of thing. But the non-man with the flesh and cloak was just, that was crazy.
I there was some discussion on the forum in which you referred to him as the elf person, Carl. I feel like I missed something there. But is he? Did I miss a description that makes him seem elf-like?
So for me, the big, I mean, I'll admit, like generally, I think when I read fantasy series, I will often look or expect a degree of analogs. Like there's usually a fair, a long-lived race. There's usually like a monstrous,
Mm.
you know, often associated with bad guys race. There's often like a short person race, you know. It's true in Malazan, for example. Like I definitely think you could see the Dungeons and Dragons influence with some of their races. Some of them are completely original, but same thing here, that I just felt like the non-men to me definitely read as like really messed up elves.
Mm.
That, you know, the immortal, like giving me the vibe. I think they mentioned something about them being like the original or like the longest lived race or something like that. And then I'm blanking on their name. What are the big scary monsters that everyone runs away from that are like the
Shrink.
consults? Steve, you're the expert. What are they called?
The shrink.
Yes, they reminded me of orcs in a big way, but orcs, like if orcs were really actually scary, uh, and that was, I don't know, that was, those were just the parallels I drew, and I don't know if that's, you know, actually accurate. We certainly haven't gotten that much of either of them, but that's how I read them, I guess.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Yeah, I haven't read enough fantasy to look for them, so like that feel like something I should have got. Steve, this is your reread. How did it feel coming back to this world? Third
It feels
time you
great.
said. So did you read the whole series twice over or this one?
No, I read the first book once, and then I came back and reread it, and then we read through the whole series with
Okay.
Daniel and Katerina, and so this is my third time with this book. And I just, if you all are liking so far, then you're going to enjoy the series because it's a lot more of everything you just talked about.
Nice.
And the prologue, there's things in the prologue, and I won't say what, but there's things in the prologue that you'll refer back to throughout the series. That prologue is packed full of stuff. But yeah, the cloak of faces was something, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah. I wonder, I'm going to predict that probably not in book one, but I suspect we will, I mean, not only see that non-man again, but we may even find out what the deal is with that cloak. I just feel like that's something that like there's got to be a crazy backstory about. And I don't know how long it'll take to get there, but I do suspect a little, for the first theory for the night, you could say.
Sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, it was there was the one part that I highlighted right before the time jump, where it says the world forgot them for 2,000 years, and I think that's referring to the Dunyain. So that really intrigued me because that was just fascinating. That this, I guess they're like a sect of monks or what have you, that they stay hidden for 2,000 years. And so then my question then is, okay, what's bringing them maybe back into the fold. I guess so far it's just Kellis venturing off, but we don't know much about that. But that part just really intrigued me, and I highlighted it.
Yeah, that first section with the 2,000 years ago is really dense. A lot happens. I mean, you get kind of these brief scenes of like, the molestation and like then, revenge of the young prince, the young Anasurimbor. But there's also a lot of history and lots of references that I imagine, like Steve said, when you look back, you're like, oh my God, like there's so much, there's a whole history behind that one name or that one line. And that definitely was something that was really intriguing and was difficult, because you're taking a lot of terms all at once, and they're not really being explained, but was very intriguing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we talked a little bit. I'm not sure if you had jumped on yet, Carl, but I was mentioning that there's a lot of information, and don't try not to be overwhelmed with it because it does get explained. So don't feel like you have to know right now because we'll learn about them as we go. So about all these things. So try not to let that. Try not to get caught up on those things too much because it does get explained as we go.
Okay, very cool. That's the vibe I got. I definitely thought. I mean, I felt so far, I don't know about you all, but as I've gotten further into the book, even just in this first act, the actual act of reading it got easier. Like I became more familiar with the terms, particularly once we started to see like people representing the different factions and, things like that. It definitely wasn't so, I couldn't just skim read or anything like that. It's still pretty dense writing, but it wasn't nearly as difficult as the prologue and even chapter 1 was, I found.
Yeah, I agree. It did start to feel like a fairly easy read afterwards. I did have to skip past the words that I didn't know yet or didn't understand. I did not use the glossary. I didn't look things up there. It felt easier to not slow my reading down that way. But yeah, just if I was okay with not knowing what something was, it was a fairly easy read, which I did not expect, honestly, because I think the series is often compared to Malazan, which I don't think it deserves the reputation it gets in terms of how difficult it is to read. But it's not really similar though. Like I did take a while to warm up to Malazan, so this doesn't feel quite like that. Carl, I know you mentioned the ability of Kellis, is that his name, to predict what people will do. I thought that was fascinating. It seemed almost like he had a certain power. There was talk of some probability, and there's a lot of discussion of what comes before come no what came before predicts what comes after or something to that effect. I'm forgetting, but there was some really nice language around it that I tried to understand and then gave up because I couldn't wrap my head around it. I feel like we'll probably figure out what that means. But before and after are important words in this world, it seems like it was very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes right back to the epigraph of the prologue. If it is only after that we understand what has come before, then we understand nothing. Thus, we shall define the soul as follows: that which precedes everything. And even the title of the book, "The Darkness That Comes Before," is it's interesting, the philosophizing about these ideas being inherent and souls being inherent before anything even comes of them, before the decisions that are made. That there's these tides, you could almost say. It reminds me of Dune in a big way. I mean, a lot. I'll admit I've read a couple interviews with Bakker, the author, and he explicitly mentions Dune as a source of inspiration and a favorite read of his. And I can definitely see it both in terms of the very political, sandy, atmospheric writing style he takes, but also the focus on philosophy and these ideas of prescience and human behavior and how one might even be prescient, like what that actually means, like what does that physically look like for a person, like how does that influence their personality. For Kellis, it's certainly like Paul Atreides, without getting too into Dune spoilers. It's certainly you could say is a corruptive influence, and I definitely get the vibe that Kellis is not the most. Well, we know it's not even a vibe. Like he does things that are not particularly moral in the prologue, and yeah, I thought it was really interesting, very intriguing.
Yeah, and I did wonder about that epigraph. I Thus we shall define the soul as follows: that which precedes everything. Does that mean that we understand nothing about the soul? Is that what's being implied there? And also, I guess, somewhat related, but not quite, uh, is the fact that Callis was able to predict what people do. Is that some sort of commentary on free will, the existence or lack thereof? That was a very fascinating prologue.
I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
I think everything you're saying is certainly, that's sort of what I was thinking of when I was reading all of that. I'm curious, Steve, what your experience was beyond just like understanding a lot more of the story going into the prologue. Like emotionally, how did you find the story that's told in the prologue? I mean, it's almost like a short story. That initial Kellis moment and everything. What that experience was like for you for this third time?
I understood a lot more, and there was a lot of things that I did not catch. That just the prologue alone, that I have to be really careful. There's things that are mentioned and that come into play in really big ways later. Even the first little portion of it, and then the Kellis portion. There's things that happen, like I said, in that section too, that come back later. That I don't think there's any way to pick up on that unless you know what happens later. So you don't really. And there's just so much that's thrown at you that it's hard to keep up because you're trying to learn all these different terms and the world and the Shrank and the other factions and things that are being named and the other names. So it's hard to keep up. But I just love being in this world, and there's a lot of philosophy in this series.
I guess I can't help but thinking that Bakker is a philosopher, right? Or he's got a PhD in philosophy. So I don't know if anybody went on his blog, but it goes into the depths of his studies, and I had to tap out after some, because it's not just about his fiction or his writing. It's what he's been, I guess, spending the rest of his time on. But I keep thinking about determinism, right? And as you mentioned, Varsha, free will. Do we have free will? If this character can kind of see, knows what's going to happen and can make sense of the chaos, knows where a leaf will fall in a storm. I think that's in one of the passages, which, by the way, the writing is very, very smooth in parts. Some beautiful passages, really.
There's so many great lines in this in this book, in this series. There was one that I've written down. Our every thought stems from the thoughts of others. They were all.
It's fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. It like the flow of it is just beautiful. It has a rhythm, but it also, the philosophical ideas put forth are just so interesting. So veering a bit, I'm curious, going off of the idea I put forth earlier, and I'm sure I'm not the first person to talk about this, of, the elves and orcs parallels. I also felt like there was a lot of like flipping Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth on its head. Like, I don't know if anyone else noticed this or thought of this, but the Dunyain, is that the monks that come through? I mean, it sounds a lot like the Dunedain, which is the term for, you know, the Westmen, like the people that Aragorn is from in Lord of the Rings. And the idea, I just feel like that cannot be unintentional, particularly given that there just like seem to be other world building elements that are intentionally in conversation with Lord of the Rings, it seems like to me. And even the ideas of like heroism and, you know, morality and like being corrupted by sorcery, you know, you see explored through a more like religious lens, I would say, than Lord of the Rings does. Although ironically, certainly there's elements of Tolkien's Catholicism, but you know, this book is clearly, I mean, it's about a holy war, like it's about religion. And I was curious if anyone else like felt similarly, that there were like in very intentional Lord of the Rings parallels, both in the world building and maybe in some of the storytelling, and if they noticed anything else that I haven't mentioned.
I read Lord of the Rings a long time ago.
Me too.
I don't remember enough to make comparisons, but I'll believe you. I guess is the best I can say.
Yeah. It's
I'm
been
curious.
20 years for me. Sorry to interrupt.
Oh no, go right ahead. Yeah.
No, but
Yeah, no,
that's great.
I would not be surprised if we see, there's another theory, some sort of messed up fellowship at some point and some sort of quest subversion. I mean, we already know Kellis is on a quest. Kellis has a location. You know, he's going to Mordor. In this case, Mordor is the Jerusalem stand-in of Shime.
Yeah.
Right? He's seeking his father, and he's seeking what the hell happened to his father and what's going on there, which I think is interesting and adds certainly a level of there's a personal aspect to this huge conflict, you know, that I really appreciate, and I definitely think made me more intrigued in Kellis as a character, and certainly in his father too, his mysterious father, Mungus. How did you guys pronounce that? There's so many words that I have no idea even where to begin.
My eyes mostly just roll over words. So, like, the first time I did one of these discussions, I couldn't remember a single name that I had to talk about because I just roll over names and I don't actually pronounce them in my head. I've tried to get better about it since then, but I'm still pretty garbage at remembering names.
I
I
think
feel
it's
you.
Boingus, I think.
Mungus. Okay.
Angus. Yeah. It's so he actually has the pronunciation in the glossary,
Oh,
which is nice.
that's handy.
Not that I know
I always
how to
like.
read it, but
Yeah, I always like when authors do that. That's cool. Okay.
I'm
He has a
I'm
lot of
gonna.
great names too. I just have to say, like, he has a gift for coming up with names for the orders and the characters. And I mean, Anna Surinborg Kellis is like, I love it. I think that's just a fantastic fantasy name.
Yeah, and I also spotted some what sounded very close to Hindi or Sanskrit words, like the name of that sorcerer. How do you say his name? Seshwata. It sounds a lot like the Sanskrit word Shaswat, which is eternal.
Hmm.
And
Very
then
cool.
there's a word Jnanic. I that looks and sounds a lot like Jnanic, which, well, ik is anglicized, but Jnan is knowledge. I don't, the context in which that word was used, I don't think it was quite knowledge, but also quite not quite wasn't. So I wasn't sure if he had, yeah, obviously he's probably picking from some, maybe he'd made up his language, maybe he's picking from some referential languages, but I wondered if Sanskrit was one of them.
That would make sense. Yeah, definitely.
sometimes when there's so many syllables, it is difficult to to spend a lot of time. I am also listening to the audiobook at the same time, so that helps a little bit. And so I'm like doing, what is that called? There's a term for that. I can't think of it, but it's like for immersive reading or something.
Yeah.
But it does slow it down a little bit. So I have some pronunciations. I don't know if anybody's ever noticed. Sometimes you'll hear the author then pronounce it differently. So
Yes.
Yeah. Not to backtrack too far, but Carl, you mentioned the Tolkien comparisons, and I didn't notice that the first time or the second time, but I will say that keep your eyes up, because it does you'll notice a few more things.
I am very intrigued by that, and again, it almost feels like this like sort of weird, messed up mixture of Lord of the Rings and Dune, but with like, thrown into the Crusades, the First Crusade, which I don't know how familiar you all are with the First Crusade historically, but there's definitely like very clear parallels in the books that I thought was interesting. I'm curious to see how much plays out event-wise, like the history in question.
Are you familiar with the First Crusades historically?
It's one of my favorite eras in history. Okay. I mean, the Crusades in general, I think, are very interesting, with a lot of very colorful characters, and I mean, it's got it all. I mean, it's like it's kind of messed up to say that about like some of the most horrific wars that have ever been fought, but I just think it's very fascinating, and I think it certainly is ripe for a fantasy story to, explore a lot of kind of the questions that the Crusades left us with, because there aren't a lot of easy answers about, I mean, we're still seeing the consequences of religious conflict and, cycles of violence and any number of things like that. And I mean, I'm happy to, I don't know, again, like if any of y'all are familiar with it either, but like just to talk about that for a moment, if anyone is interested or also familiar or anything.
I'm not too familiar, but yeah, I'd love to hear about it.
Well, there's definitely some simplifying of events, like the Shria calling the Holy War. I mean, unless I could be misremembering. It's been a minute since I've studied the Crusades, but that actually happens in France. When the equivalent of the Pope calling the First Crusade and, like go take back Jerusalem, that sort of thing. But there are also the definite parallels there with that announcement and kind of the build up to it, where like it almost seemed inevitable at that point. And the idea that from the Christian, the Frankish perspective, that Islam was spreading further and further, and they were concerned it was, going to overtake Christendom. And likewise, Islam said, the Muslim world suddenly became afraid that, reasonably, that the Christians were going to invade, and decided, particularly because of the Eastern Roman Empire, that who had gradually, they'd been crumbling, and you see it represented in the we haven't read them yet, but they do reference the emperor. Is it the Nansur? Yeah, the Nansur Empire is definitely the stand-in for the Eastern Roman Empire, and aka the Byzantine Empire. The Senian Empire, definitely, which is like the precursor to the Nansur Empire, is definitely Rome. And so you had at the time, what is his name? Alexander Komnenos, something like that, who is the emperor of the Byzantine at that time, basically was like constantly begging. And I mean, this had been happening for generations, for like Western Christendom to come and help the East, and specifically the Byzantine Empire, because it has just gradually been crumbling and getting devoured by the Turks and different Muslim forces further east. And so finally, this coalesced with the Catholic Church and the the Byzantine Empire, kind of agreeing behind closed doors to help each other out. Although they were all driven, of course, by their own political as well as religious convictions and ambitions, and it led to a crusade being called the First Crusade, which we see reflected in chapter 2/3, I think, or 3/4. And I am curious to see where all it goes from there. There are some very distinct events and characters that exist historically. Some very like there are definitely lead figures, you could say. And there's actually, I mean, I'm one of the things I'm most curious about is one of the most fascinating little episodes of the First Crusade, in my opinion, is an aspect of it that's called the People's Crusade or the Peasants' Crusade, where is basically this like hermit who was very charismatic, who was like a priest, got like riled up a whole bunch of like farmers and poor people, and they went east and they just started like sacking everything they came across, including the people they were supposedly allies with. So all of Eastern Europe was just like terrified of these peasants who were going nuts. And eventually they got to the Byzantium Empire and they started sacking it too, and they were supposed to be going there to help them. And it's just this like weird little thing where finally like the empire just had to shut them down, and a whole bunch of like commoners got slaughtered. It's very bloody. A lot of people were punished for it, but it just kind of showed the feeling of the era, that there was this extreme violence and this religious fervor that just like drove people to just act completely madly and to just pursue violence against anyone, even people who were just the slightest bit different for them. I mean, like Jews were killed in mass. That's common story in history, but certainly in the People's Crusade. And so I'm curious to see if there is a parallel storyline here in this first book, because I don't know. I think it's a very colorful, interesting piece of history. I want to say the guy who led its name was like Peter the Hermit or something like that. I could be something the Hermit. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names. So if anyone hears me and is like, "You're an idiot. This is blah blah blah," like, please forgive me. But yeah, it's really interesting, and I'm again curious to see what sort of the lords who are the aspect of the First Crusade that is like was more official and more successful, because the Christians ultimately retook Jerusalem and established their crusader states, was called the Prince's Crusade, sort of colloquially in scholarship. And so I'm curious to see if there are parallel figures with some of the very interesting princes and lords and knights who drove a lot of the action in what really was the main thrust of the First Crusade.
I have the Wikipedia page for the Crusades open, and you're right, it's Peter the Hermit. So no one will think you're
Thank you.
stupid.
Okay. That's actually really excites me to know that I got that right. Cool.
Yeah, I too had the Wikipedia page open. So,
Steve was smiling mysteriously when Carl was asking if there were parallels, or wondering if there were parallels. So maybe you're onto something there, Carl.
I don't know, maybe.
I definitely know the First Crusade influenced at least this first trilogy. So I'm curious to see what all comes of it. I mean, there are some differences. Like there isn't, to my knowledge, an equivalent of the schools, like the magic schools that you see in this series, which makes it certainly throws things up in the air a bit, where it's like I don't really know where this is going to go. And I thought that was one of the most interesting pieces of the world building. It was like, again, not to fall too deep into referencing Dune again, but like the Bene Gesserit, but like a whole bunch of Bene Gesserit, and admittedly a patriarchal Bene Gesserit. So I'm curious to see how all of that plays out, because I thought, the schools was fascinating and their politics, and Yeah.
Yeah. Mike, you were saying something earlier?
Um, I'm not sure what I was going to say, but I have another idea just to build off what Carl was saying. So I had written down the question. So why are there all these different sorcery schools? They kept referring them as scholastics, which I found really interesting, given that sorcery is outlawed under the what they call the Inrithi. Well, that's the religion, I guess, but because I guess I'm not quite sure how they exist, and then we learn. I'm not. Is it okay if I jump ahead a little bit?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, but we learn later that there was kind of the concern by is it Akamian and his I guess his I forget the names of the other noble I should say higher echelon within his
The mandate.
within the mandate. Thank you. They were concerned about are they going when the Mathionet claims the Holy War, is it going to be against us or is it going to be against the other religious group, the other religion,
Phantom.
the Phantom? So that was they're kind of, I guess they're worried about their own existence. But then we learn later that I guess was it the Scarlet Spires, is it, that kind of teams up with them, which I found. I mean, it was kind of like there was kind of mystery elements, or a little bit of genre bending, because you're kind of like there was a sense of Akami, and also he's looking into, he's essentially spying, right, on people, and he has his he has his different informants that we learn about, one of whom has a grisly demise. Isn't his face like ripped off or something?
Yeah, that took me aback because it happened so fast. He was like introduced, and then you're following him down a dark alley, and then he's getting murdered, and you're like, "Holy shit!" Like, okay, like this is wow. They're not. He's not wasting any time. Like, okay,
Yeah. Yeah, I really, I don't want to say enjoyed. That's the wrong word. I like how Akamian kept wondering about whether he was bad, whether he was successful because he was a bad spy. I mean, he was the first time around, and then the second time when he convinces, oh god, I forget the name of the boy.
Inrao,
In Rao?
the one who dies at the end.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Inrao.
Okay. In Rao, when he wonders if it's because of pity that he is giving him information now, and there was a really nice line about whether he succeeded by failing again. That was, yeah, I liked reading that, and like I said, enjoy is the wrong word, but there's just some very interesting things to think about throughout this section.
Camian's an interesting character. I really found not everything he does is the most morally upright, but he seems to be trying and to care in a way that, like, particularly when you compare him to Kellis, for example, who, I mean, maybe my entire moral compass for the story up until this point has just been like the first person you've really spent time with was Kellis, who was like, gave me sociopath vibes straight off the bat. And I was like, I do not trust this guy as far as I can throw him. And apparently he's really big, so I can't throw him very far. And then you have, a Camian who's like, seems to actually like care about people and is like an extreme cynic, but wants the world to be a better place, and actually there are people like he loves dearly, whether it's like Inrao, who at first I thought that they maybe had, the way it was written, I kind of read it as like a weird pederasty thing at first, but then it seems like that's not what was going on, because that's what the what are they called? There's some implication that oh my god, where are they? The fawning wizards, the Sisharim, maybe, I mean, who knows? Maybe that's just propaganda or not. But there was some implication that older men and younger boys have relationships, if you can call them that. Anyway, he clearly cared about Inrao, and then Esmenet, who he loves in his own, sad, twisted way, and she him in her own sad, twisted way. I'm very curious to find out what happened with her daughter. It seems like she's dead or something. And she definitely, Esmenet and Inrao were definitely the two characters I found most sympathetic. I don't know about y'all, but they like Inrao in particular, he just like, I mean, the story repeatedly tells you this from the perspective of everyone, but like, he just seems like a really sweet person who genuinely cares. And he's almost like too naive, he genuinely believes like Mythonet is like cool and has the best intent of everyone in heart. Like, presumably he's a true believer in their gods, but he clearly is not a very good person. I mean, not least because he's declaring a holy war that's going to see, thousands, if not millions of people dead. But Inrao, like, genuinely just like wants to help people. And I thought it was so fascinating. I mean, talking about that, there's some line right before when he's getting killed by the demon dude and and the knights who are like basically Templars, where what is it, you worship torment or something. They accuse him of, oh my gosh, I thought it was fast. Oh, you worship suffering, and Inrao just thinks, it didn't understand that, it could not comprehend his faith, which I thought was really fascinating. And I'm would say I'm not a believer in anything. I was raised Christian, but I thought it was really powerful. This, like, I don't know, this young man who had such a loving, compassionate outlook on the world, and who lived through his faith in that way, and who just, defied evil unto his last breath in a really, really badass way. I did not expect him to go out like that, but he really, like, every time I thought it was over for him, he found a way to just like power through, even though he was doomed.
Well, that was really interesting, because maybe I misunderstood this, but he used, I thought, the skills that he learned from being in the Mandate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But then when he was saying you worship suffering, I thought he was referring to, because he basically, converted to this, to the, gosh, I'm now blanking on all these names. the thousand, the
1,000 temples. Yeah.
Help us out here, Steve. No. Is that it? Yeah. Oh my God. I had it all in my head, I swear, but I think it's a little bit late for me. But I felt like he's very conflicted, but then one of the things I didn't understand was that, what was the reason that he was sent off, that Akamian, I thought that Akamian helped facilitate him to go to the 1,000 temples. I don't think initially it was because they wanted him to be a spy. I thought there was something about him protecting him, but I didn't know why. I don't know if that was explained, or I wondered if anybody caught that.
I read that as he just didn't believe in the Mandate's mission and did believe in the 1,000 gods, and wanted to go convert to Inrithism. And so they didn't, that Akamian protected him.
Okay.
And helped him escape. I think he just like genuinely was a true believer in this faith and decided that was where his future lied, not with the Mandate. which, sorry, rewinding a bit to what you were asking earlier, Mike, I'm also very intrigued by what is the history of these schools. Like, we get some idea with the mandate, which we have been, that's kind of our point of view, where like they were established to combat, or more than anything, to wait for the consult. They're like the Night's Watch for the White Walkers in Game of Thrones, right? Like, they're here to like wait it out and defeat them and rally humanity together, seemingly. Good luck with that. And but the other schools like don't have that mission, and so I'm very curious to see. I'm sure we will find out more as the series goes on, what their history is, and how they rose up and how they managed to establish themselves without getting wiped out. Other than certainly their sheer firepower, clearly the mages are capable of quite a lot.
Just to add one more thing, that where I had to go back a few times, and seems to be a theme because it comes up a lot. So I think we learn that in the mandate, they are tied back to, I think, their founder from maybe thousands of years ago. So, this isn't Seswatha. I'm sorry if I'm getting it wrong.
No, you got it.
Okay. For a while there, I thought, when I was reading one of it might be in chapter 2. I thought that Akamian was posing as him. I mean, I was obviously totally confused. But then I learned that that's like the strength of the mandate is that I think through dreams, they relive what happened, I guess, during the first apocalypse, if I'm not mistaken. But then they also seem to have this power of pulling people's hearts out. But that really struck me because it's what keeps them going. Otherwise, because waiting 2,000 years or what have you for something for the consult is a hell of a long time.
I'm curious, going off that, if it's all accurate. Like, clearly the consult is real, but the idea, memories themselves, like even our own personal memories, are not reliable. And so to think then that they're passed down across thousands of years, across generations, through dreams, which are also not reliable, I am very curious to see if there has been, I don't know, if they are all true to history. That's one thing that is just occurring to me as you're talking about this, that I don't know, for some reason I didn't think about, but I'm wondering if, in the same way that you might say, like, religious text can be changed through translation and different organizations adding and cutting things from them, if even these dreams are corruptible, and if they're supposed to be magically perfect. I don't know, maybe they are, but that'll be something I'm curious to see develop.
Yeah. Even if the dreams are perfect, they're still subject to interpretation by the dreamer, right? So let's say initiates of the school have this true source of dreams. We're still reading Akamian's perspective or interpretation of what each dream means or how he feels about each one. So yeah, I think that is a very interesting thing to explore. I also loved, or was very fascinated by the sort of half-life that they're leading. One, they're not getting enough sleep, which is terrifying to me. They're not really getting any rest during their sleeping time, and it's like they're living a second life during their sleeping hours, and it's a terrible one because it's all nightmares. uh, so and what must that do to the people who are put in charge of this, I guess, preventing the apocalypse, and perhaps that to a certain extent will drive the lengths to which they will go to do what they think is necessary, which um it feels a bit like indoctrination. I guess it's a metaphor for indoctrination, but a very interesting one.
Absolutely. You're definitely right. It has to warp their personalities, right? Especially over like decades and decades. And they're definitely I mean, there's a lot of this. It seems to be going around, but particularly the mandate seems to be kind of a school of the ends justify the means, and it's all about stopping the consult. And a commune, while cynical, I think doesn't necessarily feel that is always the case. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons I felt gravitated towards him, because again, it feels like he has some gripes, and he's a skeptic. I mean, he has these dreams, but even he's a skeptic of like if the consult is actually coming back. And I think that's going back to what you were saying to Mike about Inrao, that like he has his doubts and he still can touch the magic inside him. He can still, however that works, the metaphysics, he still has this aspect of him that is tied to the mandate. And I think thematically, doubt and skepticism seems to be very important. The idea that like not falling into kind of fanatic belief and keeping an independent mind and keeping and wondering and questioning, what you're taught, regardless of the source, question and refusing to just take it at its face value, definitely seems to be something that this book is very concerned with.
Yeah.
Yeah, just reminded me of a line that I had written down on page 43. There was nothing the ignorant prized more than the ignorance of others.
Yeah, that is a great line. There are a lot of great lines, like you said, Steve.
So many.
One thing I just want to throw out and highlight, because I could not stop thinking about it, is the tusk. What the hell is that the tusk of? Yeah. Like, that's got to be the tusk of something crazy, right? Like okay, here's my crazy guess is I think it maybe is a dragon's tusk. I just feel like my understanding, I could be wrong, but my understanding is dragons come up at some point. And so that's just my random wild guess, but that has to be the tusk of something crazy, right? Like, I'm not alone in that.
Yeah, there were dragons in Akameon's dream that he inherited, right? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah,
yeah, that makes sense. It was also interesting that. Sorry, Mike, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, it's probably not a unicorn. It's probably not. I was thinking it's probably not a narwhal, but it'd be hard to. Yeah, it's a good question.
That would be so crazy, is if it turns out to be a unicorn. Like, I would laugh my ass off and also think that's like the best thing ever. It's just the most like metal unicorn you've ever seen, and someone cut off its horn and made this religious instrument. Like, that's I love that image now.
It has like, it's essentially like it's their holy writing is on it, right? Is that what we're seeing throughout the book? There's all this kind of.
It's supposed to be like the original like Bible, basically, right? Like, it's exactly. It's the original writing. Which again, question is like, has that been corrupted? Who knows who's written on that thing over the years? Like, so it certainly seems well protected, but you never know. I'm very curious to see with what the histories, the truth, I guess, in the stories that these people are told or they believe. I suspect there's going to be a lot of interesting reveals about that down the line.
So I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Mike. No, go ahead, Mike.
It's the Enrithi that view the tusk, and they follow the latter prophet, and the tusk is the scripture. Now, does that mean that the other group is they're kind of they're called an upstart faith? But it doesn't. They do have they reject the tusk as unholy. It's fascinating.
My understanding, and I don't know if this is spelled out in the chapter or because I did read the appendix a bit. I mean, at least like the specific things that we'd been referenced, because I didn't want to spoil anything. Is that the sort of theologically the differences between their faiths in a big way is like the tusk believes that the gods are all like multiple, like they're a multitude, and the other, what are they? The Phanim. What's their faith called? Phanimri believe that the gods are all really aspects, maybe, of one deity, and that it's all really about. I guess they have their own prophet. It's interesting. And yeah, they draw the line there. I was very curious about Inrao, the goddess he worships. I can't remember her name, but she was the way she was described was very, I don't know, mysterious, kind of almost eerie. I'm quite curious.
Yeah, and under the prologue's packed so much stuff in the prologue, but on the first page it does mention a dragon.
Oh.
No furnace-hearted dragon had pulled down the mighty gates.
Oh, that's right.
It does reference
There
a
you
dragon.
go.
Yeah. So.
But
Yeah.
there were definitely dragons in the dream too, because there was something about a dragon holding still while some bad things happen on the ground.
Yeah, I think we're going to see some. I mean, already with the magic we've seen done and how violent it is. I mean, one of the bad guys was wearing skin, right? He was disguised and like clearly, like that was crazy too. A lot of weird flesh magic going on and
Yeah.
weird stuff with flesh, which I'm here for. The body horror is fun, particularly in a fantasy novel where you don't necessarily expect that. But that, like, I can imagine when used properly on a battlefield, like it's gonna get messed up. Like really, you know, limbs flying everywhere, I'm sure, like heads exploding, like crap like that. I imagine it's going to get pretty crazy.
Yeah. I thought the descriptions of the where the dude with the name starting with M, what's his
Mathanet?
Mythonet?
Yeah. That guy, when he came to make the announcement of who he's declaring the holy war on, the scene leading up to that I thought was absolutely brilliant. The teeming masses and Akamians stuck in the crowd there, people fainting and being lifted out of the crowd because of that, and everybody just waiting desperately for a holy announcement. I thought that was brilliantly done. Yeah, I was confused about two things. Very unrelated. I'll start with the first one. The prophet. Did the dude say something about? I thought he said something that meant that they thought the prophet was a fake, but then they also believe in someone called the latter prophet, right? Or
There are multiple prophets.
okay, okay.
That's the thing. Yeah. I'm a little confused on some of the terminology because the latter prophet sounds like it would be the latest prophet, but my understanding is the Phanim prophet came even later. Like if you look at this in like real, what helped me think of it was like, again, this is the first crusade, right? So like the Enrithi are the Christians and the Phanim are the Muslims. And so there's some parallels there. I mean, I don't think their beliefs line up exactly. And certainly,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Enrithi are like polytheistic for starters,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't understand fully how all of that works exactly in the timeline there, but there are multiple prophets is my understanding.
Okay, okay. Yeah, because I was pretty sure that he had decried a prophet, and then they were going on about the latter prophet. I was confused by that. I don't. The other thing was the nose sticks. I may have missed it, but do we know what knowledge it is that the nose sticks have, and why it is so dangerous to let someone off the mandate be free with that knowledge? I can't remember whether we read that or if it's, or maybe I'm mispronouncing the word. You all look confused. Gnostics. That's the word I
No,
mean.
yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Do we know what it is and why it's dangerous for in route to have left with that knowledge, or why the order thinks it is? No.
My my understanding, I think they use the word gnosis starting with a G, um, if I'm not mistaken. But you can, I mean, that's a word. That's an
Mm-hmm.
English word. It means knowledge of
Mm-hmm.
spiritual mysteries. But in I think in this book, I thought that refers to their ability to see what happened in the past. I thought that's what I thought that's that skill that they have in the mandate. Sorry, I should have said the mandate earlier, but I could be wrong.
No, I definitely think you're right. I mean, I think that must play a role. I do think on some, I mean, part of my interpretation was just that it's about they're worried of like, their secret bases or their spies or any number of like the intel they have, I guess, getting out. But you're right, Varsha. I definitely feel like there's a magical element to it, or something, some deeper secrets that they were worried he would give away. And I certainly don't think we've seen it all like explained.
Okay. Because it can't be just Seshwata's dreams, because Indra doesn't have those dreams, right? He left before he was made to start dreaming. At least that's what I thought.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
This is a related point. I really enjoyed the chapter. It's a scene in maybe chapter 3. I'm not sure. I think it's around page 70. This is where we get the POV of those two more senior mandate schoolmen. I actually wrote down the names here: Notsera and Simus. I think initially when they're introduced to us, we're like, "Oh, this guy's kind of a jerk and really hard on Akamian." And then that's, I believe, the guy whose name starts with N. And then the other individual, Simus, was he was like, oh, he's more laid back, like, a little bit maybe more accommodating. But then when we get their POV and it's just the two of them talking, the more sympathetic character, we learn he's more like, I think he made some point about how we can really use what's the young man's name?
Rao.
Indra.
Yeah. It was like showing that he was really scheming and then to me less sympathetic. But I really like that chapter, and I like how, I don't know if we want to talk about it a lot, but I noticed that we do get to see many POVs. I saw you mentioned Carl. You mentioned A Song of Ice and Fire before, and this is at least mixing around the POVs quite a bit more multiple within a chapter, and in some ways I kind of like that style. Although I am a huge fan of Song of Ice and Fire, but it's just something that I appreciated in the writing.
It's like outright like a omniscient perspective even. I mean, I think there are times where we get into a more third person limited, but like, yeah, they head hop, and there certainly are like whole scenes that are just written like, oh, the crowds do this thing, like it's not talking about like someone's perspective other than like a bird's eye view. And I agree, I thought it was really interesting and really well done. It's sometimes hard to do omniscient perspective and not make it feel really cold and impersonal, but I actually felt like quite a bit of emotion, even if there certainly was a lot of darkness around that emotion with these characters. And while we're briefly talking about the mandate, I just want to hire to the Gnostic, like you said, Mike, it's a real word. And, the idea of Gnosticism in general is this, religious philosophical movement that goes back thousands of years about like to the early like Christian cults and things like that, about, and I think even maybe further back to like Jewish cults, that the God that is worshipped is actually like evil, and that like there's another God who's like out there, and you have to like defeat the evil God that everyone think that like created the material universe. And I'm very curious, like that seems like a really intentional choice to me, that like there's going to be some sort of, and we've already heard about a no God. I'm very curious to see, I mean, they oppose him. So again, like I feel like there's definitely some clear like Gnosticism influence going in here. I think again, this Bakker being a philosophy major, philosophy PhD, I think there's going to be some interesting avenues explored there, and I'm curious to see how much is. Maybe look out for the word demiurge. That's a big word in Gnosticism, kind of the Satan figure. So I'm curious. The false god, I guess you could say, the no god, if you will. Very curious to see, how all that plays out. Steve, I'm curious too, how do you feel about like the characters, knowing their journeys? Like, what's it like going back and seeing them at the beginning here, and when they're, they haven't, I imagine, gone on their big arcs yet. They haven't changed as much as they will. They haven't done all the things they're going to do and had things done to them. Like, what was that like for you?
Well, I have to be careful because I don't want to say too much. But I will say that the characters I liked in the beginning that have an arc that lasts a while, the characters I liked and I disliked, it's pretty much consistent all the way through. Like, Akamian is one of my least favorite characters. I appreciate him, but he really irritates me. So I think he's really bad at his job. He just seems like he's not good at what he does. And I guess there's some charm in that. I guess we can all relate to that. Kind of like, I think if I had to say, if I was like any character, I'd be like him, because that would be me. Like, because we're all kind of, we're all trying to do the right thing, but we all somehow fail at everything we do. So I'm probably the most like him, but maybe that's why I dislike him so much. But yeah, I think I stayed pretty consistent with the characters I liked. But there were a few that, like, I think, Carl, you mentioned Esminette is another character that I enjoyed throughout through her arc. So yeah, I think it's pretty consistent from the very beginning. I think I latched on to the ones I thought they were all interesting, but I think the ones that I liked and the ones that I rooted against stayed pretty consistent.
That's really interesting, because that's not always true with series. I'm very curious to see this play out. So would you say, of the characters that have been introduced, Esminette was your favorite, or the one at least that you personally liked the most? Or who, if you had to name a character, who would you say is your favorite?
If I had to name, Esminette was my favorite, probably one of my favorite characters. Yeah, she was up there for sure. Yeah, I think, I have to be really careful, but I enjoyed her throughout her time in the series.
Cool.
There was something, though, that this isn't a spoiler past part 1, but there was something at the end of chapter 3 with Maithanet that I wondered if you guys had caught. There's something that he mentions at the end of chapter 3 that didn't know if you guys, it's the last paragraph or so in chapter 3.
Who was that man? That sorcerer? Is that what? Sorry.
He saw Akamian, didn't he? I mean, he noticed Akamian. I didn't know what the hell was going on there, but like he clearly like picked Akamian out of the crowd. Oh, because he's one of them. I remember they mentioned Akamian says that. Where he's like, that's the only reason he would be able to pick him out of the crowd, was because the sorcerers can identify each other. Yeah. I totally forgot about that until you just mentioned that. Yeah, that's right.
The few can see the few.
The few, exactly.
So, very intriguing.
Yeah.
It is. It is very intriguing.
I kind of want to guess. I'm probably way off the mark with this, but I want to guess that this. Why can't I say his name?
Maithanet.
Maithanet. That is he callous? Yeah.
I hadn't even considered that. That's interesting.
I mean,
I guess it depends the timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the timeline? I didn't really track the years, to be honest.
The second prologue happened in about a year, or at least the year before in numbers, than where we started in the first chapter. So this was 4,110, I think. And the Callus chapter was 4,109.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly.
Interesting. And I mean, he is presumably, I don't know, he would have had to like replace the guy, right? But I guess we don't know what all he's capable of. I mean, that's an interesting theory. I hadn't even thought about that.
So this Maithanet came out of nowhere and took over and did a lot of things that people didn't expect him to. And Callus had some strange powers to read and understand people. So I think it was at that point, Steve, I wondered if this guy was Callus. And also the fixation on what's the name of the city they're going after?
Hmm.
Shimei. Um, that's where he was going to find his father. Maybe he already found his father and something bad happened and now he wants to wage war there. Or this is still part of the mission to find his father. That's my guess at this point about what's going on.
That's really interesting. Well, other just like idea that I have no investment in, but just occurred to me as you were saying that. What if that is his father? What if Mythenet's his father?
Mm.
You know, both start with M. Not exactly a strong foundation for a theory, but I don't know. We're throwing stuff out there. I have no idea. That's really interesting. I didn't even
Yeah.
consider that, Barsha.
Oh, also, I guess the other, I say clue, but I guess all of these I'm taking as hints that it might be Kellis, maybe. But the fact that that's not his actual name, it was a name that he took, right? So
Mm.
it's someone, he has a history and is possibly someone we met, maybe. But, or I guess the other theory is that he's one of the consult. That's the easy guess, perhaps.
It does seem like they're separate though. Like he's separate from the consult. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's clearly bad vibes, but like he I don't know. Like he's not teaming up with the. I feel like we would have seen him and not the Knight Templar guy
Mm.
if he was teaming up with the weird, creepy crow creature who, oh, so icky. I love it. I love the way the like monsters are described in this. Like just, Baker is a real way with words.
I think the crow, it's the crow with a head the size of a baby fist or something like that, but perfect teeth. I just read it recently. That was great.
Yeah.
Mm.
So, I love it.
And so that was a representative. That was a consult character, right?
Yeah.
Mm.
But we don't know much
Yeah,
about.
one of they know the agonies, which who knows what that means, some sort of evil magic or something. And he's like one of the, I don't know, he's really old. I remember getting that from what he briefly said. He did the classic, villain thing of being like, I am so old and powerful and you cannot stand before me, like, which I, don't get me wrong, I'm here for. I love, a little chewing the scenery. But he definitely had a bit of that going on.
Mm.
I'm curious, who are y'all's favorite characters right now? Or if you had to name one, favorite character, putting you on the spot, who's your favorite at this point in the book?
I think I really latched on to Espinette. And it's for a strange reason. I think her sorrow with her daughter is really compelling. Like I feel really sad for her. There's a melancholy about her that I I don't know how to pick words. I was gonna say that I like, but it's not something I like, but it's just something I appreciate. I feel like it's really well done. Yep.
Mm-hmm. I don't think that's strange at all. I mean, it's certainly some of the more moving, like personal
Mm-hmm.
writing in these opening chapters. What about you, Mike?
Yeah. Well, it's not the crow with the baby face. Although, really, like we said, really fascinating character. I really did like Kellis. I'm curious what's going to happen with him, and I didn't see him as like a bad guy. I see him as he doesn't see good or bad. I see him as this very, for lack of a better word, Zen individual that does what he is, whatever nature, whatever physics, etc., whatever has come before tells him what to do, kind of thing. Like a kind of a very. But I just find that I have not come across many characters like that, so I'm really interested to see what happens.
He definitely is really interesting. I mean, just in terms of like the basic idea of the character, I found him the most intriguing. For similar reasons to you, Mike. I did the thing that made me like that made my skin prickle, reading him was he just didn't seem to like feel bad about like leaving the guy to die, the trapper, and things like that. Like it's stuff like that where I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, this dude's got a really skewed view of things. Like I do think he's gonna do a lot of good things, but I also think he's gonna do a lot of terrible things. I very much feel like he's gonna be one of those characters who straddles, the gray. Like I don't think he's gonna go around and like sexually assault someone. I mean, maybe he will. Who knows? But I do could easily see him manipulating. I mean, if he's Mathanet, like I could totally see that, right? Like manipulating a holy war just to like mess up his dad or something. Like, who knows? He like feels like the type of character who would like not feel bad about getting thousands, if not millions, of people killed for whatever goal he feels like he has. But that's just how I read it. My favorite definitely was Enrao. Again, I don't know what I think it's because so many of the characters exist in this very like gray moral space in this series, and like Enrao to me seemed like he was like a genuinely good person. Like he's dealing with very complex ethical and moral decisions, but to me he seemed like he was genuinely a good person in a way that maybe Esmenet is too. I don't know. We haven't seen enough of like we haven't really seen her make decisions yet,
Right.
other than like to be a prostitute or not to be a prostitute, and she's kind of has like it seems like she has not much of a choice there. So, I like her too. I mean, certainly I'm with you, Varsha, that like her daughter's story, like that made me feel kind of sad for her, and the way she loved Akamian, but in a way that like, again, very twisted, and like, to me, it definitely seems like they're both projecting a lot of their own issues onto the other person. And like, she like worships Akamian in a way that does not feel healthy at all.
Yeah.
Like and again, he seems to have weird issues with women and his self-image. So I mean, I enjoy it. I enjoy their interactions, but I'm also like, I don't want you to be romantically involved at all because you guys are so unhealthy.
It also doesn't feel earned, her worship of Akamian. I think everything we've seen of him so far. Yeah, he's a powerful sorcerer. He has that going for him, but other than that, it doesn't feel like. But I don't want to say he's undeserving of affection, but not the kind of pedestal that she's put him on. That feels unnecessary. But yeah,
Absolutely.
I love the what was it 2-page long musing of how she loved him and how she thought about him. And this was funny. I think in the middle of that, she turns to him and says, "Is what are you finding difficult?" And I had to turn 2 pages back to realize she was following up on a conversation because Akamian said, "I'm beginning to find this difficult," or something like that. And then there's 2 pages of text before she addresses what he said. I thought that was really cool. There's a little bit of stream of consciousness going on there, I guess. Yeah.
There definitely are aspects of the writing sometimes like that where it, to me, honestly in a similar way to Mlazin, but not as extreme, where I'm like, this is needlessly obtuse or needlessly where you're like, yeah, you're jumping. I mean, it is cool, but I did have my moments where I was like, why is this like you could have just like, rejiggered things a bit, or like, just like given a brief explanation of what something was. Not again as extreme as Malazan, which I love Malazan. Now that's not to like talk bad about Malazan. It's one of my favorite stories ever, just period. But it does have its moments where it's like it feels like we're hopping around, just like saying what something is or like what a character is doing. Certainly, which isn't to like undercut the subtext, because there's a lot of subtext, and I really enjoy that they don't. Baker doesn't hold your hand. They're just like he like trusts the reader to like pick up on things, and I like that. I think sometimes maybe he goes a little too far, but not usually. Again, I think generally his prose is really wonderful and dense in a good way. Yeah, I really found myself attracted, not like in a, I intrigued by and emotionally absorbed by Akamian and Esmonet's relationship. Like, again, it's so messy, and they're so like. I kept thinking of that. Like, have you guys seen the meme of um, a guy and a gal in bed, and the gal is like, I bet he's thinking about other women, and then it's always some other like stupid thought that the guy is thinking about, and I just felt like that was both of them with each other, where like they're both like, you could input either of them, where I feel like they both have moments where like, this person doesn't really care about, or this person's thinking about how like boring or whatever I am or dumb I am, and that just was so, I don't know, it's interesting because it felt very real, but was also like very, unhealthy.
One of the things that I did appreciate with their relationship is he lets her in on what's going on, because he's connected and he's doing all these, really kind of interesting spying and what have you. And I think that shows that he sees her, as I don't know if he sees her as an equal, but he respects her, and then we see her kind of chiming in the conversations. Is it when Inrao comes and knocks on the door? So I thought that showed the trust that they have in the relationship.
Absolutely.
I caught something, but maybe it was nothing. But I think in that part of whether it's chapter 3 or chapter 4, there is imagery. She has the tattoo of a serpent, and a serpent comes up actually quite a lot. And then I think she talks about eating an apple. So
yep, I noticed that too.
Adam and
Eve,
no,
totally.
Or Genesis references.
Her daughter specifically, that comes up in the story with her daughter. Her daughter was like asking, like wanted an apple, and then the guy, like the shopkeep, is like sees her and is like, oh, she's a prostitute, and kind of gives her a look, and she's like, all right, like, honey, let's move along. There definitely was I'm right there with you. There's definitely big Christian Genesis symbolism going on there.
Yeah, that scene ended with her thinking to herself that she should have bought an apple elsewhere. That made me wonder if that's what happened to her daughter, something to do with apples. But then it was also a pretty flippant thought. So maybe not. Like, it didn't have the gravitas to it that it would have had if that's what had caused her daughter's death or whatever else happened to her.
Yeah, do you guys think she's alive or something else happened?
I don't know. I was convinced she was dead.
Sure, you know.
Steve doesn't know. It's interesting.
I have no idea. Yeah.
I thought she was dead. In my head, she was gone. But
I think the first time she came up, I thought I was sure she was dead. Let me see if I can find that page, because it's when Akamian's talking to her about something, and then like 2 seconds later, she's talking about her daughter, and Akamian has a resentful thought about how the subject quickly shifted to her. And
my daughter. He mentioned something about 6 years ago, and she said my daughter died 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Okay, so she is dead. Okay, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I think this. Sorry, I'm changing the subject. Does anyone have anything else to add to that? Okay. We talked about this very briefly, but I was unsure about the nature of the relationship between Akamian and Inrao, because there were a lot of confusing statements there, and I don't even know if it's important, honestly, because everyone's just casually saying some. So the way Akamian was thinking about Inrao, it was as if they had a sexual relationship in the past. But then when we meet Inrao, he thinks of Akamian as a father figure. And I don't think that. So I think in this world, the relationship between an older man and a much younger boy is wrong, because in the prologue, the priest person who's the Dunyan who come in, and there's a priest or someone who
Before the Dunian,
assaults the prince, and
It's
Yeah,
like
he
the
says,
chancellor, isn't it?
yeah, the chancellor, yeah, the bard caught the boy, yeah. And he says, "Forgive me," he muttered over and over, but tears fell only from his blind eye. Um, that so this is wrong, right? Like he's asking for forgiveness. So it's not like, this is some sort of acceptable relationship in the world. So I was very confused by the nature of their relationship. We got different signals from everyone, I thought. And Akamian keeps talking about students that he loved, which feels shady, but also it could just be a very innocent sort of affection for his students. uh what do you guys think?
I
I'll say
would
or go ahead, Mike. No,
no
go ahead.
no I was just going to say I kind of caught a hint of something strange going on with their relationship, or I mean, just the fact that they were probably minors when he was having these relationships with,
Mm,
or they were students, and I assume they were minors. So, but
Yeah.
it wasn't very clear, and I
mm,
think there is a part where Inrao says, yeah, like you, I forgot who said it. He was like a father or an uncle,
mm,
or it's late, I think in chapter 4. But yeah, I got some hints at that. It's a
mm,
good point.
So I definitely initially read it as like a weird, creepy, pederasty relationship. Like Inra was definitely like a child when he came in
mm,
and was first with Akamian. But then, and yeah, the way Akamian thinks about him is weird. Like
mm,
it's not, it doesn't really read as like the way a father thinks about a son or even a teacher thinks about a student. There's like this weird, almost, I don't know. He's put on a pedestal too in a way that
mm,
feels strange. But then Akamian like pretty explicitly references the other school having men and younger boys having relationships. There's like an explicit reference to that, which again that could just be you know gossip. I do know that that was practiced in some courts at the time. So I don't know if that's, like there was a lot of, like obviously you go back, like a lot of people think of the Greeks, and then I know the Romans then took after them. And then there were Arabic courts who took after, I think inspired by the Greeks too. Pederasty has been a thing for a long time in a disturbing way. Um, but so that made me think that it wasn't. But like, yeah, I'm right there with you, Varsha. Like, it's weird the way he thinks about Inrao,
mm.
and I didn't actually get the vibe that Inrao clearly cares about him, but
Yeah.
it certainly doesn't seem like there's the same level of affection, or it's not certainly felt in the same way. Like the way Inrao feels about Akamian is definitely very different than the way Akamian feels about Inrao. And
Mm.
that was certainly the thing that gave me the ickiest
Yeah.
like feeling initially about Akamian, where I was like, is this dude like sleeping with all his students, like his like child students?
Mm.
But I think it's just I mean, maybe it's intentional. I don't know,
Yeah.
but I don't think they had a physical relationship. Again, just because the way Akamian talks about the um, other school
Mm.
and their practices.
Yeah. Yeah. I almost wonder if the author wants us to think that and then tell us later that it's actually not that. Because we meet another student of his, right? The prince of some place or the other,
Yeah,
who also he thinks of as one of the students that he loved, which, yeah, it feels for a strange word for a teacher to use with regard to their students. Um, New topic, unless anyone has anything else to say. Did the meeting between Indrao and Akamian happen in a dream? Because it felt like the beginning of a dream sequence, and then it wasn't. They were actually in the tavern. So I was confused by that. Um,
Hmm.
and I don't think it was. It felt like it was in the real world within 2 paragraphs. But then the way it started, it felt very clearly like a dream.
I'll just jump in here and say I don't. It's certainly possible. I felt like there's a lot of dream references here, but I'd have to go back and find where you mean like when they first interacted.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
The first time when the knight comes over and hurts Akamian,
yeah.
which he has a real injury after that, right? And or I'm not sure.
Well, is this? It starts the section in his dream, so he definitely at least starts with a dream.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I don't remember. I'm just glancing through this.
Yeah. And then when we get to the part where
Oh, I think he wakes up. Yeah, I think he wakes up between flakes of sun in his eyes, and then a Camion, and then the impossible mutter trailed into the rumble of page. Like, that's weird. Like, he wakes up in the middle of this tavern. I don't know. I don't know what's going on there. That's weird. You're right to highlight it.
yeah, light spilling from his mouth. Yeah, I felt like he was being pulled into that room somehow. Like, maybe maybe Akamian was doing some sort of sorcery to get him there, but would he, yeah, do we know yet whether they can freely use magic or do sorcery without being detected and punished for it? Or can they do it discreetly enough that they won't be caught? We don't know, right?
Well, we know the few can see the few, but beyond that,
Yeah.
I don't know that it. We also know that regular people don't see their sorcery until like they see the effects. So I don't think they can be. I mean, I think maybe it's possible that like one of the other magic users could sense them, but I don't know actually if that's been explicitly said or not.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, I was wondering if he would use sorcery in a public setting like a tavern to pull in Rowan to where he is somehow and make it feel like a dream. But yeah, I thought that was interesting.
There's some skill that I couldn't find it referenced, but it's another ability that they have in the mandate. But I couldn't find it. I thought it started with a C, but it's different from the gnosis, or it's something else. And I thought it was some way of manipulating people, which I think would be, could be done out in the open. But I think it's referenced, but it comes up a couple times. So yeah.
You mean the logos?
Mm.
Is that what you're thinking, Mike?
There's this
that was referenced at least once. There was another word I was thinking of. Crap.
The Cisharum or the Kisharum is the phoneme sorcerers. That's a C word. I don't know if that's it.
Well, it's just to say it's just evidence that this is extremely rich. So, I found it. It's the Cants, Cants.
Oh.
I thought that was just how they do the magic. No, I didn't get the impression that it was local to just the mandates.
Okay.
Let me see. That's
the Cants of compulsion.
Yeah.
Another A Song of Ice and Fire thing, while you guys are maybe or maybe not looking it up, it just occurred to me that the North is where the bad guys are coming from. That it seems like they're slowly moving south. So I don't know if these are intentional parallels or not. I mean, I'm convinced of the Lord of the Rings and Dune stuff, but the Song of Ice and Fire, I'm not sure about.
This was 2005, right? And the first Song of Ice and Fire was the 90s?
Yeah.
It definitely came out, well before this.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know if it's... as prominent an influence or not.
So I only read,
or if that was an intentional parallel.
I only read the first 2 books of Dune. Did you read like the whole 6 and then into the Sons?
I've only read the first 4.
First 4.
I'm going to read the last 2 by Frank Herbert at some point, but I haven't gotten to them yet. Definitely the influence I see is primarily just from the first like couple books, really. Maybe the third.
I didn't get into the third yet, but I actually read this. I read Dune Messiah because I heard that there was some influence for this series.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, I'd already read Dune like 2 years ago, and then I was like, maybe it'd be interesting to make some comparisons.
I've got to reread Dune. I read all the Frank Herbert books a few years ago, but I feel like at the time I read them to find out what happens, and like I didn't read it for the themes. I did appreciate all the stuff around religion, but yeah.
I'm definitely getting big Paul Atreides vibes from Kellis. Like I definitely see him becoming a similar sort of corrupted or I don't know, just manipulator, Messiah type, like using his abilities to, I mean, because we've seen him do it on a small scale. And theoretically, I mean, this is just my writer brain working, but like your prologue is supposed to in some way foretell, what the rest of the story is going to be about. And so if this guy is manipulating people to battle the big monsters, I could easily see him doing that on a much larger scale. I mean, again, that goes back to kind of the Mythonet thing. If that's him, or I could see him doing something similar, being like, another faction coming in and messing up all the plans of all the religious people.
So it's more of a question than a theory, but I'm thinking that maybe in part 2 or maybe who knows, in the end of the book or the next book, that at some point Kellis is going to fight on the other side of this holy war. This is what I'm guessing. I've not read ahead or anything, but because obviously everything is converging on that town, Shaime, with their, that's where. They're the temples, and now they're working with the other the other school of sorcery to wage their, well, they're just really in the early stages to wage the holy war. But I do see now, we know that Kellis is seeking his father, who is apparently there, right? That's what I understood. So there's going to be some convergence. But again, it's more of a question maybe than not a fully fleshed out theory, but I wonder what others think.
I think that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, that makes a lot more sense than my theory, because maybe Kellis is actually in Shaime at the moment, and maybe that's who they'll face. Yeah, because that's where he was headed. I forgot his name again.
Mythonet.
Yes, thank you. I wouldn't know if he was Kellis. Why did he end up here is a big question for me, because when we met him, the only thing he wanted to do was find his father, who is in the city that this guy wants to wage war against. So yeah, I like that theory more. I will replace my theory with yours, Mike.
Oh no, I liked yours too. I thought that was really intriguing. I didn't think of that at all. So yeah, mine was more. So both could maybe even happen. You don't know. But
well, do we? I mean, I guess there's a year between the times, but do we know if Kellis can even do the magic? Like, he manipulates a dude, but I don't. My understanding was that wasn't really magical. Like, he's doing some like extreme, again, like deductive reasoning, like psychological warfare on the guy. Like, it's basically magic, because like that's not, people can't function like that. But like, I think that at least how I read it was he wasn't actually like practicing sorcery in the way that like the other like Akamian does, or whoever in Rao with like the cants, as we said, and that sort of thing. Did we see him? Like, genuinely, I'm not sure. Did he do magic?
I don't think I think you're right. It's not magic per se. It's you know, I went back to the prologue before this discussion, and there is something in there about how they isolate themselves, and they've spent all this time tuning, their senses or what have you. I mean, I actually think about like, Buddhism, whether it's like mindfulness or whatever, to the extreme, and
Totally.
and much more beyond that, probably, when I was reading that. Yeah, I don't think that's what I like. That's what intrigues me. I mean, not that I'm not interested in the sorcery side of things, but yeah, that's just why the characters seem so different to me.
Totally.
Yeah. Have you seen Maithnet do magic?
We've seen that he definitely can. Yeah, I guess you're right. We haven't necessarily seen
So
him do it, but we know that he theoretically can, because he sees. That's a good point. So we don't even know if he's, maybe Kellis is. Yeah, I don't know.
So the assassination of the first scribe, the scribe spire. What is the name of that group who joined?
Scarlet Spires. Scarlet Spires.
Scarlet Spires. Yeah. So their head was assassinated 10 years ago, and the person got in where they weren't supposed to. So I guess they have some rules about the magic that they believe, but are being broken at the moment. So only the few can see the few. Yes, but maybe that's the default answer and makes the most sense. But also, it's just something they believe. If the
Great point.
consult, for instance, can they see the few? But and then
We know that their magic doesn't work the same way, because Inrao doesn't see them. When he's like, he like freaks out. He's like, how are they? I forget what it is exactly that one of the bad guys does, but it's like clearly magical. And Inrao's like, that's not, I can't see it. Why can't, like, what's going on here? That's not supposed to be possible. And you're right. Like, similarly, the phoneme sorcerers are immune and don't, I guess, show up. Yeah, they don't see them. That's why they were able to assassinate the Scarlet Spires. Which, who knows what's going on there, right? Like, why did the Sea Sharim like go in and assassinate the Scarlet Spires leader? Like, clearly there's a whole story there.
Yeah.
I know that's an interesting point. Like, again, like thematically, it's definitely important that the stories they're told aren't necessarily the truth, and that the people convince themselves of things, and having an open mind and like a questioning mind is definitely something that this book is concerned with. And so I think that's a great point, Varsha. What we're told about the magic may not necessarily be accurate. I also like Mike's theory, by the way, going back to that of Kellis fighting alongside the phoneme. I do wonder about what is going on with, I mean, we're supposed to wonder what's going on with Moengus. For some reason, I just think of like Genghis Khan. I don't know if that's like an intentional, but like this, it just sounds in my head like Genghis. Moengus, that he like, what's going on with him? Why did he finally reach out? Why did he tell them to send his son to him? And he did it through dreams. What's going on there? Like, suddenly all of their priests suddenly like woke up and were like, holy crap, we got to send Kellis. Like, there's a lot going on there. And I'm very intrigued by it. There's the prologue. I mean, I'm going back to Steve. Like, I can only imagine. There's so much that happens where you're just like, what is happening? And to understand the full context, I can only imagine.
And I'll say, I think I read the prologue twice, and what you just mentioned, Carl, I missed. So I didn't even, I missed that. he was sent in dreams, but as I mentioned, dreams come up a lot so far.
Mm-hmm.
That's like it's happening quite a bit. I think we probably need to pay attention whenever somebody's dreaming.
Absolutely.
But what I was also wondering about the father is whether the father is part of the Sisharim or what have you, because or is he some kind of leader, or what is he? And why would somebody from the Dunyan, like why did he leave? Maybe it's explained. I don't think so, but
no, it's not.
Yeah, I have a lot of questions.
No, it's all, he's a big mystery box there. And I think, I mean, it just occurred to me, what if it wasn't even the father reaching out? I mean, do we even know the father's alive? The father could be dead, right? Like, who knows? I mean, who knows, right? Like, it's all a big mystery there. Like, we have no idea what's going on. And like you said, Mike, we need to pay attention to the dreams, definitely, because it's weird. He reached out through dreams. Like, what's going on here? Especially because that doesn't seem to be their thing. Like, the Dunyan aren't, like, the way they live their life isn't, like, dream-based. Like, they don't have dream magic like the Mandate. At least not that we really saw. Like, you know, who knows? But, and similarly, Moingus, he is one of them, so he probably can do all the crazy crap that Kellis can, so who knows what he's influencing, you know? I'm very intrigued to see where that goes. And it's interesting that we veer so far away from Kellis. I assumed we would be following him from the get-go, but it seems like a Camion is our main character, for now at least.
This is maybe a dumb question, but is a Camion the title character for part 1? He is the sorcerer. And then, not to get ahead, but what's part 2?
The Emperor, right?
Oh, okay, interesting. I didn't even pay attention.
Yeah, the Emperor.
Oh. Okay, so maybe we don't get back to. I did. Yeah, I did. I mentioned earlier I did want to come back to Kellis, maybe, but maybe we don't for quite a while. And if not, that's okay.
I mean, I bet he's in this book, right? Like, I bet we'll see him again in this book, but who knows when. I mean, certainly I expected him to be a major player in part 1, but he seemingly wasn't, unless he's one of the named characters and just, you know, hasn't been revealed as Kellis yet.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
Look at Steve's smile. I wish the audience could see the look. Oh man, I gotta give you credit, Steve. You were good at like withholding. You know,
it's not easy.
He has the best poker face.
Mm-hmm.
For real.
It's fun hearing all the theories though, because that was me. That was me trying to guess what's going to happen next. But yeah, it's fun.
Nice. How does it feel to be on the other side, being in the know of all the things?
It's fun, but I wish I could also go back and not know again. Just experience it again. So, but it's still fun to. It's great to read with all of you because it's like doing it again for the first time. So, it's cool.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So, I guess, do we have anything else that we'd like to discuss? Otherwise, that seems like a good place to wrap up. Let's do outros where people can find you, find your books and your podcasts, and we'll call it a night after that. Mike, do you want to get us started?
Oh, sure. Well, I'm on the PageChewing forum as Mike M, and I don't know if people would want to reach out to me, but that's where you can find me.
Nice. I guess I'll go again. So you can find me on pagechewing.com or on iTunes or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. Yeah, and also just want to mention before we wrap up that we are going to be reading Carl's book here in just a little bit. So we'll be doing the same thing for his book soon. So everybody,
I'm going to be sitting in your seat, similarly knowing me. Oh, that's going to be interesting. I'm very excited and nervous and all the feelings. Well, yes. So you can find my book Truth of Crowns in print wherever books are sold, or an ebook on Amazon. You can find me on social media at Carl D. Albert, most places. In fact, I think that's my username pretty much everywhere. And on the PageChewing forum, please join us. It's a wonderful community if you haven't already.
I second that. Also, join us there if you'd like to read and discuss these books along with us, or any of the, I don't know, 3 other read alongs that we've got going on there. Yeah, and you can find me on my YouTube channel, Reading by the Rainy Mountain, and there's links to my podcast from the About page and other ways to reach me. Yeah, we'll see everyone in 2 weeks from now when we'll be discussing part 2, which is chapters. Yeah, I should have done chapters instead of page numbers when we started. Chapters 5 through 8. Yeah, see everyone in 2 weeks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.